Welcome to my learning development portfolio for e-learning experiences. What this portfolio will focus on are the range of technologies available to teachers and how these technologies are applied in the personal, pedagogical and organisational context that we find ourselves in. The power of e-learning, or in other words, what is it that we're using it for, is that it's more than just electronic learning. It is using current technologies and a lot of the mobile devices such that we can embrace the dynamics of social networking. As cognitive design solutions suggest, the power of e-learning is more than just technology. It is the power of social networking dynamics that has now been embraced with e-learning as well. We've come out of an industrial age and now we've moved into an information age in the 21st century. And this affects the personal, pedagogical level of learning and the organisational level of learning. People collect information today, they aggregate it so they can use it when they need it in a timely manner. E-learning experiences has really been quite interesting because what I've learned from it is that I've had a lot of use of, internet technologies, email. I've used blogs. I've been in forums. We use Moodle in our organisation for work. And so in doing my PLE, I found it quite interesting that I didn't realise how much already I'd integrated a lot of these technologies into my own work. Consciously I didn't realise it, but what I really didn't realise is that I wasn't really using it in the best way I possibly could. What I've learned from e-learning experiences is that there's a greater power of the social dynamic of e-learning, and in so that I can actually use these technologies to help aid the learners in my course to develop a more self-directed approach of aggregating information rather than just receiving it from me, being more self-directed, self-motivated to go out there and collect this information and realise that I am not necessarily the font of all knowledge when it comes to my particular field of expertise. And that's been really good because I've instigated some of this into the practice already in my classes and found that the learners themselves have a great ability to find information, get other expert advice and apply it. And they've used things like blogs and presentation material like Prezi already, as well as the traditional ones of PowerPoint and emails. We can call them traditional yet. And it's been really exciting to realise that I can rely on them a lot more to aggregate the information, but also provide information back to me that can help me understand better ways of delivering future learning, modern learning, in a less hierarchical manner and in a more social environment where we come together and look at information together and develop information. I'm a learner too, even though I'm, in the old sense, the expert. In e-learning experiences, one area I came across in the first module that really was helpful was that I hadn't been using social bookmarking and the ability to aggregate information in a real credible way at all yet. And what I decided to do was to actually take it up more, introduce it to my students as well as introduce it to myself, and use it as a tool both for myself and in my classrooms to encourage students to aggregate information using things like RSS feeds, and to actually apply this to their blogs that they used for their history assignment, and to create a resource that was not only interesting and compelling, but that will go on to be interesting and compelling and be added to well past the end of the subject. Another thing that I came across in the first module of e-learning experiences was the fact that I hadn't really been using the resources, that vast array of resources we're looking at, in an effective way, either myself or with the students in my classes. And what the module did help do was to look at things like wikis, blogs, and not just what they were or what the individual areas were, but just the vast array of different types of wikis, blogs, and tools and resources that are out there in the space we call the internet, and that allow us to aggregate information and allow us to use that tool to actually develop new teaching resources. And I started to embrace it. A few of the things like Symbaloo that we came across in the class I use now. I especially use Prezi a lot now. I've started to push all my PowerPoints over onto it and develop new ways of presenting to students that are actually more engaging, more fun, and actually allow my students to actually take those Prezis and actually put information into them and aggregate information into my own Prezis. It's scary at first because you think, oh, what happens if they come across information that really is not right or wrong? But that's your job as a facilitator, is to actually help them discern the good from the bad. And that all of us teachers should be practicing. Ask them why they chose the information. Help them understand how to look at information. That's a new way of teaching, because we're not just teaching in our expert field. We're teaching them how to look at information and discern what's useful and what's not. And that's new to my teaching practice. One of the areas of conceptually that I came across was in the article on communities of practice, the theories of Jean Levey and Etienne Wenger, in regards that all learning is social and that it's part of daily life. They came up with their theory of situated learning, where we, both at an informal personal level and at the organisational level as a teacher, for instance, that we engage in communities of practice, and that's how we really learn. And most learning occurs in a social form. As Wenger and Levey suggest, communities of practice, by definition, are where groups of people get together to practice and process information in a shared domain of interest. As part of the second module for e-learning experiences, we had to become engaged in a learning experience ourselves and to complete a short course and analyse it. And in so, I became, in a sense, a member, or in fact, a member of a community of practice in learning French with an online course of LiveMocker. What's interesting is, as Wenger and that suggests, that there's a lot of peripheral contact in these groups to begin with, because you feel like an outsider. It takes some time to get more engaged with the other members of these communities of practice. And it was an interesting process. The course was good, it's structurally good, it engaged a lot of the different learning technologies we used or were exposed to in e-learning experiences, and it gave me a sense of how a community of practice works, being able to get comments back off strangers about the quality of my French speaking, the quality of my grammar, and what was really interesting was that the responses were really encouraging, and it made me want to continue to learn. In fact, that's what I have been doing, improving on my French even after I completed the assessment event for the second module. What I learnt most from engaging in a community of practice, learning French, and in regards to understanding the nature of what a community of practice is, was that learning only occurs where there's activity. It occurs in the relationship between people. And that as educators, it's our job to get our learners and ourselves with them to participate in these communities of practice where we have situated learning environments. We focus on issues or interests that have brought us together, those domains of interest that we're teaching, and encourage them to use the technology to aggregate resources not just for themselves, but for others. And to once having aggregated it, even to think about using it to send out to others and provide a resource for other learners, future learners, as well as just themselves. To add to this, we looked at George Siemens' article on connectivism, and where he quotes Karen Stevenson, where she says, "I store my knowledge in my friends." He goes on to say that the pipe is more important than the contents. And in a sense it's true, because it's about being able to access information and teaching the students to access information, to take the information and use it. But you can only take the information and use it if you can acquire it and aggregate it. And this is the big issue about connectivism, that learning today is not simply about having all the knowledge stored in your head. Learning today is that much of that knowledge can be external to your head. It can be held in other places, on your iPad, on your iPhone, any mobile device, on your computer. You simply have to have the ability to access it when you need it at hand. And I've seen this actually happen in a small way with a friend of mine who fixes cars all the time. I had a problem with my car, and he was able to, while he was looking at it, hop on his iPhone and quickly take a picture of what the problem was, email it to a friend, who was then able to email him back exactly what to do to fix it. In the last module for e-learning experiences, we looked at e-learning in practice in the organisational context. For this, we did a case study, and I did it with Natalie Hull and Kelly Fulford, where we looked at the organisational barriers to social e-learning. Social e-learning extends on the ideas of community, so of practice, by engaging in the idea that we can take more information from outside of just our closed group, so that we don't become an echo chamber, as Anne Bartlett-Bragg suggests in her article on social e-learning. In doing so, we can incorporate new ideas and new practice and even new organisational structuring, so that we can become better teachers. And as Greg Whitby says, to become a new type of teacher with a new DNA. I love that line. And Stephen Heppel, also in one of the other videos that I've saved to my learning development portfolio, he suggests that if we take this to its full extent, it'll be the end of education, but it'll be the beginning of learning. As a final thought on what I've learned from e-learning experiences, in a practical way, both at a personal level and what I'm trying to do when student organisational level, is to get away from the text heavy, we murder our students with text. We overload them with text heavy information. And yet learning is physical, it's active, it's visual, it's engagement with the modern world. We seem to still use, as Greg Whitby says, that 19th century approach, that industrial approach to teaching. And I do it in my classroom. I have to stand there in front of a group of people and deliver as if I'm the overseer or the boss or the expert with all the knowledge. I'd like to think that we can move away from this. I'm trying to do it myself, getting my students to be more engaged in producing the information, producing the work themselves. I know it. I can recognise it if they know it. I don't have to necessarily present it all to them as much as now say, look, this is what we're looking at. This is what we want to find out, in my case, about how to use a camera or how to understand the processes going on. And get them to research it themselves, get them to discuss it, get them to find other people's views, other information, bring it back, and then with the facility of my aid, to look at it with them and analyse that information and teach them how to do it. Because when they leave our environment, they're on their own, and they're on their own for good, and they're going to still be learning, but they have to have the tools to be able to aggregate that information, externalize it to a lot of extent, and to actually then be able to pull it in as they need it to use it. And that, I think, is where we should be heading.